What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another book review. I'm Jared, hanging out, Houston, Texas, having my afternoon coffee on a Sunday. We are getting ready here for some wicked cold temperatures that the rest of the country just refers to as winter. But for some reason here in Texas, if it drops below 30, people panic. It becomes kind of a metalocalypse scenario at the hardware stores and grocery stores. Power goes out, pipes burst, becomes a real shitstorm. But hey, great state to move to if you're looking for no state income tax, I guess. But I guess back to the subject of why I made the book review today. We will be reviewing one of my absolute favorite books, possibly my favorite nonfiction that I've ever read. Yep, now that I think about it, it is my favorite nonfiction that I read. I actually read this book back in July of 24 when Hurricane Beryl came through and knocked out all of our infrastructure for about 10 days. I sat on the back porch in 100, 110 degrees and read this book, hanging out in my kids' inflatable pool to get through it. I'm talking about Tom O'Neill's Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret Society of the 1960s. This book will completely push your wig back. And by that, I mean, it'll blow you away. If you think you know anything about the Manson murders or why it happened, you don't. I think that you probably have one frame of reference, one perspective on it, and that is going to be the motive based off of the helter skelter theory, based on the helter skelter book that was written by Vincent Bugliosi, who was the prosecuting attorney in the Tate LaBianca murders, or the Manson family murders. Tom O'Neill originally was contracted, when he started this book, he was contracted to do a 30th anniversary piece on the Manson murders. He quickly started uncovering quite a bit of inconsistencies in stories, things that seemed like conflict of interest. He also started having conversations that he was being completely stonewalled on and told to drop it by some pretty high ranking officials, which led him to just dig deeper. Tom O'Neill spent 20 years putting the information that went into this book. 20 years. That's a life's work. It's incredibly commendable, respectable, and the book really shows. It's wrote very well. It seems like he's having a conversation with you. I've talked before about some nonfictions can come across bibliographical or like you're reading a works cited page. And this doesn't come off that way at all. It comes off like a very fluid conversation. Yes, at times there become a lot of moving parts, a lot of different stories taking place at one time. And also there are a ton of characters involved as the book goes on. I actually started taking notes because the story was so interesting. I wanted to make sure that I had everything correct. And I started taking notes halfway through on a notepad, and it kind of helped out. And it's incredible. If you like any kind of true crime, historical inquiry, conspiracy theories, you're going to want to definitely give this one a read. It should be at the top of your list. Some of the things, without uncovering too much, no spoiler alerts, but the first thing he found was a very big conflict of interest between the prosecuting attorney, Vincent Bugliosi, who was actually the author of Helter Skelter. So it's a huge conflict of interest that a prosecuting attorney he has a motive to prosecute at that point, which should have resulted in a mistrial. And Tom goes into more detail about that. There are also some local and state authority oversights kind of sweeping under the rug when it comes to Charles Manson personally, because there was multiple parole violations that went on over years for Charlie as well as for members of the family. And for that kind of for that kind of miss on local authorities and parole officers, there's no way that kind of stuff happens by accident, and it doesn't sound like it. And when Tom explains why, you'll see why too. There were also weird things going on in the 60s when it came to race relations. The racial tensions were at an all-time high. Black Panther Party, Martin Luther King, things like that. Um, the government was actively placing operatives inside of those organizations to cause chaos, to break apart those black nationalist uh, groups. There was a huge motive for that. They think that that could have played a part into this as well. Tom goes into great detail about that, and that is some of the stuff that will really shock you, what the government was doing in that regard. They were also experimenting with LSD heavily back in the 60s, the government, I mean. In San Francisco in the 60s, there was the Haight-Ashbury scene, which was the really large hippie scene, and the CIA, along with other agencies, were running test experiments. Like one of them was called Operation MK Ultra, which is where they were experimenting with LSD on people. There was also Operation Midnight Climax, which they would use prostitutes to lure unsuspecting Johns into brothels that had been outfitted with two-way mirrors, microphones, and they would dose them with LSD, these Johns, and then monitor them. So there's a couple other murders that happened, and they think that maybe the MK Ultra was related. So they break into that. I mean, I can't speak highly enough about the book. I rate everything on a scale of 1 to 5. One being terrible and 5 being the absolute best. Um, I'm kind of like the coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide, like Nick Saban, the all-time great coach. Like he never gave out. He'll never give a perfect score. I don't think I will either. It would be really hard for me to do that because I always think there is room to improvement, and you might find something better. So I think Stephen King's It, I rated a 4.8. It was flawless epic of literature. But when it comes to nonfiction, I'm definitely going to give Chaos a 4.8. Hats off to Tom O'Neill for working so hard and never giving up, to put something like this together, to uncover the truth or what he thinks is the truth, some of his opinions and things like that. Hats off, 4.8, solid read. Go ahead and check it out. If you like the video, give me a like, give me a subscribe. I don't really plan any of this stuff out. I come in here, I hit play, and we do a review. I'm reviewing what's on the shelf, and that's usually all of my 24 reads and other books I've read up until then. I'm currently reading Dune, book 1. I'm about a third of the way through it, and hopefully it gets better. But we'll jump into that when we do the book review for it. So give me a like, give me a subscribe. I haven't got any comments yet. I'd really like for someone to start a conversation. If anybody's read this and you want to start a conversation on this, let's do it. I find this subject, I find the 60s extremely interesting. The entire scene, it was, what a time, before the internet and TikTok and everything else kind of warped everybody, when people actually had to read maps, ask for directions, and actually talk to people. I'd love to start a conversation on it. Give me a like, give me a subscribe. Let's talk more. As always, thanks for stopping by, and keep reading. We'll talk soon. Thanks.